All right, so this is my blog for We Are Dancing for You, chapters 1 and 2. I know we were only supposed to talk on chapters 1, or yeah, 1 for this, but I think it would be good to incorporate 2 as well. So chapter 1 was entitled Oral Narratives and Native Feminisms. And chapter 2 is the California Indian History, Genocides, and Native Women. So the first one dealt a lot with feminism and oral traditions. I wrote that Native culture is not misogynistic, but Western influence promotes and changes it against the matriarchy, the stories of no more jeans or no more red for women that she provided, also the stories of increased regulations on virginity and purity, and just kind of a different outlook on that. And we see the westernized approach approaching a culture they don't understand and ultimately changing it into something where sexuality is actually something more of taboo than it really was before. Gender equality and feminist studies are central to sovereignty and self-determination. Patriarchal retellings, help create a mythological framework of the past Native culture, help deconstruct that traditional narrative by re-examining who really wrote these. Native women are typically seen as Pocahontas or squaw, helpful, beautiful, or dirty, and kind of like a bastard outcast type as character. Oral traditions support methodologies of history, culture, and sovereignty, and the Hoopa stories focus on gender equality and not necessarily a overarching matriarchy, which I thought was interesting. This chapter just really showed the overstepping of one's Western influence and things they didn't understand, and the very fact of survivance of the Hoopa people and the story, and even indigenous people in North America in general, is largely due to oral traditions. And by re-examining those traditions, you can start to deconstruct the settler colonial ideals that were kind of ingrained into the history of the time. So transitioning into chapter 2 was about California Indian genocide, as I said. This chapter dealt with understanding genocide as a means for resources. They talked a lot about the gold rush and how it's kind of glossed over, that it wasn't really a big impactful thing. It's something I wanted to bring up in class but didn't get around to. It was the fact that I feel like Native Americans are seen as lesser, especially at this time. But I find it hard that without the gold rush, people would want to go out there and oppress these people. I think like the gradual oppression would have still happened, but it was really because of there was an influx of people in a location they didn't understand to reap the resources of gold in the West. Kind of like how Dr. Boxer brought up the example of like pipeline communities and things that get established around native areas, and how problems and violence and sexual assault happen because of the increased people that are around there for resources. Violence was analyzed in this chapter as necessary to colonization, especially pertaining to women. Women were taken by minors as their children, slaves, concubines, and wives. The gold rush was a major component of the murder of indigenous peoples. The education system, as I said, kind of glosses over that. The establishment of reservations, we see assimilation tactics through education and boarding schools. And we also see here that elements of told history being again rewritten and re-looked at. A lot of this and the story of survivance in indigenous culture is promotes a re-examination, and that's always a good thing. Even in non-native history, I feel like history in general needs to be always reanalyzed, because there's always somebody who can pull something else different, and maybe we find some document or evidence or artifact that tells us a different story, and we have to go. It's like an endless puzzle that's never really solved. We kind of get as close as we can until something new comes. So yeah, just a general synopsis of both chapters. Questions would be along the lines of how do we even like deconstruct the Western narrative beyond like the scholarship. I feel like if we had more primary resources like Turtle Longwomen's granddaughter, it would be a lot easier. But unfortunately, a lot of those have been lost, and we, especially academically, tend to stick to more secondary articles or secondary sources, which is kind of unfortunate. It's still effective, but it kind of loses its luster, in my opinion.